So our third character that we're going to meet here is Montag's wife. We ready? He opened the bedroom door. It was like coming in to a cold, marbled room of a mausoleum. After the moon had set, complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside. The windows tightly shut, the chamber a tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito-delicate dancing hum in the air, the electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink warm nest. The music was almost loud enough so he could follow the tune. He felt his smile slide away, melt, fold over and down on itself like a tallow skin, like the stuff of a fantastic candle, burning too long and now collapsing and now blown out. Darkness. He was not happy. He was not happy. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask. And the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. So Montag here comes into his bedroom, and notice the imagery that Bradbury uses with this room. He compares it with this great simile to a mausoleum. A mausoleum is a tomb, a place where dead people are laid to rest. He uses imagery also of darkness, of complete silence. And all of this suggests that this room is lifeless. Which is very odd because at the end of the sentence he says the room was not empty. Everything in this room feels lifeless. It's like a tomb. It's completely dark. There's no moonlight. Remember, Clarice was associated with moonlight. There is no moonlight here. It's a tomb world with no sound. Everything feels very lifeless and barren. And yet, it's not empty. And when he comes into this room, suddenly he realizes he's not happy. And he repeats it twice, really emphasizing he's not happy. His happiness was like a mask. Great simile here. So earlier in the text, it talked about his fierce grin that never went away. We can see here now that this was fake. He wore it like a mask, and the girl here being Clarice, had run across the lawn with the mask. So she's woken him up. He sees now, she is like a mirror. He sees now the true state of affairs as a smile slides away. We've got some great similes here describing how his smile seems to melt away off his face. And now he knows the truth. He's not happy. Without turning on the light, he imagined how this room would look. His wife stretched on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb, her eyes fixed to the ceiling by invisible threads of steel, immovable, and in her ears the little seashells, the thimble radios tampered tight, an electric ocean of sound, of music and talk, coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind. The room was indeed empty. Every night the waves came in and bore her off on their great tides of sound, floating her wide-eyed toward morning. There had been no night in the last 2 years that Mildred had not swum that sea, had not gladly gone down in it for the third time. So Montag's not alone in this bedroom. His wife, who we find out her name here, Mildred. So this is Montag's wife. is in here, and she is described lying on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb. So again, we see another simile. All of this imagery here associated with her, again, lifeless. It's almost as if she's dead. And then he says, the room was indeed empty. Seems very paradoxical. So a paradox is something that seems to contradict on the surface, but reveals a deeper truth. So he says, Mildred's in the room, he's in the room, but he says the room is empty. That seems to contradict. What's the deeper truth here? Even though these people are there, these people in the room, Montag and Mildred, are lifeless. They're alive, but they're not really living. And part of the reason we find out that she's so lifeless, that she's like this dead body, is she is completely consumed by these seashell radios. These thimble radios tamped tight. These little earbuds in her ear that are distracting her, that take her out in the sea with talk and music, right? So not literally taking her out on the sea, but metaphorically. It's as if she is so far away, even though she is in the same room with him. And we're seeing here a really interesting characteristic about this society, that they are very technologically savvy, that they are very technologically advanced. So tech advanced here. And it's interesting, this is a great example of how sometimes fiction can predict the future and sometimes even create the future. So remember, Bradbury's writing this in 1953. There was no such thing as a Walkman. There was no such thing as an iPhone, earpods, AirPods. I can never remember what they're called. And yet he imagines a future where there would be. This technology was actually completely unbelievable at the time, but he imagines a society where screens would be the size of an entire wall and in color, and where you could put something in your ear and hear music all the time, wirelessly. And interestingly enough, the inventor of the Sony Walkman, the very first mobile music player, came up with the idea after he read Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Okay, so let's keep going. The room was cold, but nevertheless he felt he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the curtains and open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So with the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour for lack of air, he felt his way toward the open, separate, and therefore cold bed. So he and his wife do not share a bed, right? Again, seems to suggest that this is a very barren and lifeless situation that they're in. Very much like there isn't any love in their marriage. An instant before his foot hit the object on the floor, he knew he would hit such an object. It was not unlike the feeling he had experienced before turning the corner and almost knocking the girl down. His foot, sending vibrations ahead, received back echoes of the small barrier across its path, even as the foot swung. His foot kicked, the object gave a dull clink and slid off in the darkness. So as he walks to his bed, his foot kicks something. He stood very straight and listened to the person on the dark bed in the completely featureless night. The breath coming out of the nostrils was so faint it stirred only the furthest fringes of life. A small leaf, a black feather, a single fiber of hair. He still did not want outside light. He pulled out his igniter, felt the salamander etched on its silver disc, gave it a flick. 2 moonstones looked up at him in the light of his small handheld fire, 2 pale moonstones buried in a creek of clear water over which the life of the world ran, not touching them. So we've got here this great metaphor. I don't want you guys to get confused by this. What he is describing here are Mildred's eyes. These 2 moonstones are her open eyes, which, by the way, is a little creepy, right? He turns on the light. His wife is laying on this bed, completely uncovered, in the dark, silent, with her eyes open. But it's like she's not there. Is she sleeping with her eyes open? I don't know. Something super bizarre going on with this lady. Mildred. Her face was like a snow-covered island upon which the rain might fall, but it felt no rain, over which clouds might pass their moving shadows, but she felt no shadows. There was only the singing of the thimble wasps in her tamp-shut ears, and her eyes all glass, and breath going in and out softly, faintly in and out of her nostrils, and her not caring whether it came or went or came. So we've got another great simile here. He compares her to a snow-covered island. So when we think of islands, we think separate and apart from everything else. When we think snow, we think cold. So again, all of this imagery being associated with her suggests something very barren, very lifeless, very sad. The object he had set tumbling with his foot now glittered under the edge of his own bed, a small crystal bottle of sleeping tablets, which earlier today had been filled with 30 capsules, and which now lay uncapped and empty. So Montague has just discovered here that his wife took an entire bottle of pills.